Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthagutare Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasharani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarani. Welcome. So prior to doing trauma therapy, it's best to let the devotees know you work with that they may or may not experience disturbance, as feelings may surface in the course of therapy, just as turning up the heat on ghee can cause unwanted substances to come to the surface. So it's best to give them coping resources, which we have covered, as well as the 988 crisis line to call if needed. You can give them your number to call if needed. It's recommended for an inexperienced therapist to consult regularly with someone who is more experienced without revealing any identifying information about the person they're working with. And in a community, it's best to be a little extra careful about identifying information. Sometimes people even change the sex of the person or just change certain things. So today, before we do our demo, I'm going to go over some of the therapist setup questions that can be asked. Someone wouldn't ask all of them prior to doing the expansion brain spotting. So you can get the person you're helping, get the devotee client talking about their desired state of being, feeling, living, or performing. What do you want most out of all of this is a question you could ask. Or if you could wave a magic wand, it's the miracle question from Family Systems. What do you wish could happen as a result of this session or as a result of our work together? How will we know if you have expanded into this desired goal enough to feel you have achieved what you want? You can get specific and measurable. A lot of people have parts that kind of minimize their progress. So it can be helpful to have various ways to show that they have made progress. What do you have inside of you that will give you the highest possibility of connecting to this state? And use their words. Is it something you experienced strongly in the past, witnessed it in someone? What do you think will help bring your body and mind and spirit to this felt sense? What do you want to be known for in this life? Always get the core feeling state, like confident, peaceful, hopeful, caring and compassionate, joyful, relaxed, etc. What are the core words that describe the emotions you feel when you are in the state of being you want to live in more frequently? So you can bring out the person's feelings about the positive expansion possibility, and bring it more subcortical. What, when, why, and how questions. What is a memory when you have felt this most strongly? What else? When else have you felt those feelings? When did you stop living in this state of being? When do you feel it inside of you now? How do you think we should set this up to give you the highest probability and possibility that you will succeed in reaching your desired expansion goal? What do you can bring in the senses, because that can help really ground as people are visualizing what they would like to have happen. What do you feel, smell, taste, hear, and see? Where do you feel the positive expansion possibility strongest in your body? If it's weak, you can get them talking more about it by kind of asking more questions. Right now, how strongly do you feel? So clients' words, 0 to infinity. I give people the option, you can use percentage or fraction. And then you find those expansion brain spots, and we'll be demonstrating that again today. So today we're going to be doing activated and expansion double spotting. So we'll determine the activated issue. In this case, Padmavati wants to work on. We'll activate more if necessary. We'll take the 0 to 10 SUDS or disturbance level, activation level. We'll find the location of the body activation. We'll find the inside window, and that's when the therapist, I've mentioned this before, asks the client, where is the best spot for the pointer? To one side, center, the other side? Hmm. Then, then, move the pointer to the vertical, higher, lower, and then also horizontal, a little bit this way, that way, until the spot really clicks for the person. This is like the precise, most activated spot or the precise, strongest expansion spot. And if it's online, it's okay if the person's gaze goes off screen, if that's where the spot is. If they say higher, higher, and then hit the edge of their screen, they can find a spot in the space where they are past the screen, and then kind of bookmark the spot to remember for later. Like, what is it next to? I mean, in my room, there's all kinds of pictures and things that people can help to remember where their spot is, and I also will make a point. So we find where the expansion possibility is held in their body. We find the expansion brain spot. This is after the activation. And then they can just pendulate back and forth between those spots using their own instincts. If someone's activated spot is really super intense, and this I've witnessed, then it's best for then they'll often maybe just stay there for a couple seconds here and there. And people can, as I've mentioned before, people can process on the expansion spot, like stuff will come up quite often. So if an expansion spot doesn't present itself initially, Lisa Larson recommends processing on the activated brain spot. So an expansion spot may emerge later. That can happen. So now we'll go ahead and set up for the demo. We're all set. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so for this demo, Padmavati's issue is actually speaking in front of groups or sort of feeling the center of attention with groups. So she's bravely and kindly offered to do this demo. And so all of us can give her, as much love, well wishes, and just really create a safe and unconditionally accepting and welcoming place for her to do this demo. And Padmavati, what is it you would like to focus on in this session?
You mean like what's the issue?
Mm-hmm. I know we've talked about it, but everyone else doesn't know what it is that you would like to see happen in this session. What would look like success?
Success would be um, it would be confidence and confidence in my service, whatever that service may be, and not feeling restricted by this issue. And my goal is Krishna consciousness rather than self-consciousness. So
Mm,
that's kind of like, yeah, I feel like I'm stuck in this self-consciousness, which is preventing me from actual Krishna consciousness. So,
mm, I understand. I understand. Um, you mentioned this started adjusting from being in a devotee school, going to public school. Is there anything more you want to share about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember being a very confident child. I grew up in a devotee farm community. And um, when I was 12 years old, after being in the devotee day school my whole childhood, I transferred to the local public school. And it was like this really intense traumatic experience for me. Kind of where I grew up was very much like this happy little devotee bubble, and then leaving that world was this huge culture shock. And kind
Mm.
of like at that sensitive time in my life, it was just really hard for me to deal with. And I couldn't relate to any of the kids. They couldn't relate to me. And so I became really, really shy and withdrawn. And I remember having this English class where we had to give speeches. And there was one particular speech that it might have been like an impromptu, it had to be something that you think on the spot for the kind of speech where you're up in front of people and you're given a topic and you have to speak on it on the spot. And I think my mind just went completely blank and I could not think of anything to say. And it was really, I felt really embarrassed. And, there was like kids snickering. And ever since then, when I had to give any future speeches, I would feel like and really intense anxiety for weeks leading up to having to speak in front of people. And over time, I feel like it has improved kind of like, as I've gotten older and I've intellectualized, okay, to some extent it's gotten a lot better from where it used to be. I'm not in anxiety for weeks, but I can still feel this like sudden intense anxiety or dread when I think about when if I'm suddenly on the spot in front of people, or I have to give some kind of public performance or speech. And so it even actually around the same time in my life when I had started public school, I was also taking piano lessons. And I remember having some piano performances where like my hands started to shake and I would just like, I got so nervous. And so I would dread, any future piano performances that I had to do. And I actually like throughout college, I took a speech class and I forced myself to do a lot of speeches. In grad school, I had to give speeches, and I feel like I have really come a long way, but it just like hasn't gone away. Like I'm actually surprised. I thought like it would just completely go away, but it's still this like kind of inexplicable anxiety and dread that comes up for me. And intellectually, I don't feel like I know there's nothing to actually be afraid of. Intellectually, I can tell myself like, no one's going to hurt me. No one cares. And I don't care if they judge me and like all these things, but it's just like this, something in my body just makes it happen. So
Mm.
yeah.
Is there a thought that comes up for you connected with it at all? Like,
Um,
what might be a negative thought just connected to this issue that kind of encapsulates what you just shared?
one of them might be that I'm gonna forget. I'm gonna forget. It's like performance anxiety. I'm gonna just forget what I have to say or do, and I'm gonna look bad.
Mm.
I
Today
also,
I today I
sorry.
experienced a little bit of that. At one point you might have noticed. So I'm going to forget. And what are the emotions that you feel when you think I'm going to forget?
Um, just, just anxiety and dread
Mm. And where do you feel it most strongly in your body?
in my stomach.
Mm. And the activation right now of 0 to 10 disturbance, how strongly do you feel that feeling in your stomach right now?
Right now, it's maybe a 7 or an 8.
Mm. And right now we're going to get the activated spot. So does it feel more activated when you look over here, less, or the same?
Um, Maybe the same.
Mm-hmm. And what about the middle?
Maybe slightly more.
Mm-hmm. And over here?
Not anymore.
If I go higher, is it more? And I can come down. It can kind of let me know when it feels most activated. Further down, further up,
I think it was slightly further up from there.
right there.
Yeah,
Is that the spot?
I think so. It was
Uh-huh.
slightly more places in there.
Yeah, where it's slightly more, that works. And a little bit to one side or the other. It's a little bit more activated over here, or a little bit more if I move it a little bit to this side,
Maybe on that way. Yeah,
move it this way, right there.
yeah.
So go ahead and bookmark that spot. Notice kind of what's behind it. And I'll do the same. And now what would you say is your greatest expansion possibility to overcome this issue? Who or
Um,
what,
the
who or
first
what gives you the strongest feeling of confidence?
first person that comes to my mind is my spiritual master because um first of all, he gives the most absolute incredible public speeches that are just so incredibly Krishna conscious, and there's no self-consciousness at all. So I'm very inspired by that. But also just feeling from him so much unconditional love, which I know is Krishna's love. And when he sees me, I feel that he sees all of me, all of my flaws and imperfections, and he still loves me. So that's something that it really is really touching.
Mm. And when you feel that feeling in your body, where do you feel it strongest in your body?
In my heart.
Mm. And as you feel into his unconditional love and acceptance and his confidence speaking, and you feel that in your heart, how strongly do you feel that now? 0 to infinity could be a fraction or percentage.
How strongly do I feel his love right now?
Do you feel that felt sense of his unconditional love, acceptance? Or
Yeah.
it could be just how strongly you feel that feeling of confidence in your heart right now.
So like out of infinity, you're asking, do I feel
Yes,
that?
it is infinite. The possibility is infinite. So, someone
I
might
feel
say
that
halfway to infinity, you could do it as a percentage or fraction.
I feel that his love is infinite, but maybe I can only experience a fraction of it. So right now, maybe 25%.
Uh-huh. And when you look over here, and you do have the bilateral sound going, right? I
Yes,
saw
I'm
it's
doing it right now.
perfect.
It's very
Perfect.
soothing.
And when you look over here, does that feel stronger? That felt sense in your heart?
No difference.
What about here in the middle?
Maybe just slightly more.
And what about over here?
I feel it more over there.
Yeah, quite often the expansion spot is in a different area than the most activated. So if I bring it up higher, is it more stronger
No, not sure.
and lower?
Yes.
Do you want me to keep coming down until you tell me to stop?
Okay. That's good. That feels like a good spot right there.
And if I move out further, is it stronger?
No,
In further, stronger or no?
no,
So right there.
yeah, that's good.
And it's your choice. Would you like to start with this spot? And then whenever you feel to, you can move to the other spot. If you want me to move the pointer to the other spot, just let me know. Just say other spot. Or you can just, you've bookmarked the other spot. You can just gaze back and forth according to your own instinct or intuition. You'll, you'll just know. What are you noticing now?
I'm just I'm feeling his love. And I feel that he would tell me that there's nothing to be afraid of.
Mm, there's nothing to be afraid of. See where that goes. Well, allowing whatever wants to surface.
Just feeling that mistakes are okay.
Mm.
And that it's just part of being human. The thought that just popped in my head was just be present. Just be present in the here and now.
Mm.
Because those thoughts are about the future that doesn't exist yet.
Mm.
I could try the other spot.
Right there.
I think it was a bit higher to that side. I think higher, and then slightly more to the middle, right there. Yeah. I just see a child who had a really hard time. Yeah, that child just had a really, really hard time in that phase of life. There was just a lot of pain. She just needs love, I think.
Mm. You're doing great. Mm.
She just needs to be told that it's okay to make mistakes and that we should try to be perfect.
It's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect.
And that she's loved with all of her imperfections.
Mm.
I can go to the other spot now.
Where all that love is. Did I hit the spot?
Yeah, I think it's slightly lower, maybe.
Right there?
Yeah. Yeah, just feeling like that love is always there. And it's just a matter of making the choice to access it, that it's there in my heart where Krishna is, and it's always there and I can always access it.
You can. And you can also always access the spot wherever you are. If you're about to give a talk, you can gaze back and forth between whatever audience, whatever group, and the spot where it is.
I should have brought some tissues here. I wasn't expecting this.
I can start I can start mentioning that. Feel free to go and get one if that's
Yeah, I'll be right back.
possible to do. Sure. So while she's getting the tissue, I'll mention that that I did prompt more than I might if I was doing a one-on-one for the demo, you know. Um, if it wasn't a demo, I may have just, let her feel her feelings longer without asking, what are you noticing now? Um, so it's a judgment call, an instinct call on the part of the therapist. Welcome back.
I feel complete with both points for now, I think.
And that is perfect timing. So we'll do a post check. When you think I'm going to forget, maybe imagine you're with a group. How activated does it feel to you now on a scale of 0 to 10?
The thought of speaking
The
in front of
anxiety, dread, that feeling in your stomach.
um well, right now I'm speaking in front of a group and I don't feel right now I actually don't feel any anxiety anymore. So I don't know, maybe it's just a one right
A
now.
1. And where do you feel the 1? In your stomach?
That's there, yeah, that's where it is.
Mm. And when you think of the love, acceptance, and confidence of your spiritual master, and you feel into your heart, how strongly is that felt sense of his love and acceptance and the confidence that comes with that, 0 to infinity now?
Maybe 75.
Wow. So just in that short session, you went from a 7 or 8 to a 1, and from a 25% to a 75% of infinity. And that's remarkable. I'm really, really happy for you. And thank you so much for volunteering. Thank you for doing this. I
Thank you.
know it's a particular extra challenge because, this is a group and you don't know everybody. And so
Yeah,
I just
it
want you
really,
to know I'm super grateful to you.
yeah, it definitely felt like diving in the deep end to process this in front of a group.
Mm.
But 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 yeah, I had a feeling it was going to be really helpful, and it was.
Mm,
Yeah.
I get it. Well, we can unpin each other now. If you just right click, it'll say remove pin. And everyone can turn their video back on. Mm. And now I'm going to speak about an entirely different, this is upon request. Um, I definitely appreciate when participants in this seminar um, request what they'd like more information about. Um, and so I've been asked to include information about child sexual abuse, as well as other forms of child abuse in the seminar. And it's a tough topic. This class will include some general information and address common misperceptions. I will intersperse the information with some quotes from Srila Prabhupada. I have gratitude towards Sanaka Das for compiling these quotes. And this class will detail the origins of denial and victim blaming stemming from Freud. A lot of people don't know that aspect. I will discuss the importance of institutions, particularly religious institutions, prioritizing the care and well-being of children and organizing both for prevention and treatment. I'll also give examples of trauma-focused treatment. So to start with Srila Prabhupada, he said, he wrote, the protection of children gives the human form of life its best chance to prepare the way of liberty from material bondage. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 185 purport. So now for some history. In 1896, Freud detailed the histories of 18 patients, 12 women and 6 men. He linked their symptoms to childhood sexual trauma perpetrated mainly by fathers, but also other close relatives, siblings, and caregivers. This was the origin of Freud's seduction theory, but it was short-lived because his colleagues rejected the paper. He faced being ostracized. Some even accused Freud of implanting memories. Like, how could this be? Especially in the elite upper classes he was working with. The chair commented that it sounded like a fairy tale. Freud's response under this kind of pressure, with his career at stake, was to deny his findings, repudiate his findings in 1897, and then come up with the theory that his patients' emotional problems were caused by fantasies or delusions of seduction that had not occurred. Then in 1899, Freud came up with his theories on childhood sexual attraction to parents as a normal stage of development to explain the fantasies. And that's in quotes, quote unquote, fantasies. He birthed his ideas of the Oedipus complex and Electra complex without evidence. Since he is widely accepted as the father of psychology, he was also the father of, unfortunately, denial, disbelief, and blaming the victims of child sexual abuse in this regard. And now on to some stats. There is agreement that statistics on child sexual abuse, also with initial CSA, do not represent the extent of the problem, as it tends to be underreported. Studies place rates for US females at 25.3%. Studies of adults show 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men recall having been sexually abused before the age of 18. An estimated 30% of sexual abuse is never reported. And that's an estimate, could be higher. A UN International Children's Education Fund study from 2005 to 2013 in India reported child sex abuse of Indian girls was 42%. In 2007, a major state-sponsored survey in India reported the prevalence of CSA as 53%, so more than half. There's other countries, but I wanted to just, the US and India for devotees. The Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse as of May 2017 had heard from 6,875 survivors. So that's a major, major study, of whom 58.6% reported child sexual abuse in religious institutions. The most common religious contexts in which alleged abuse occurred were religious schools, 39%. Survivors took, on average, 23.9 years to tell someone they had been sexually abused. Within religious institutions, organizations, barriers included fears of disclosing to devout families or because of attitudes towards sexuality, fears of being ostracized, and reluctance to quote unquote bring shame to the religious organization. Poor responses to disclosure, such as not being believed, are also barriers. Religions that value patriarchy, obedience, and surrender, and claims of divine justification, along with closed communities, may make grooming easier. This was a study by Rain and Kent in 2019 came up with that finding. Most people assume, and I was one of those people, that the vast majority of perpetrators are pedophiles. Research shows between 25 and 50% of child sexual crimes are committed by pedophiles. And as many do know, there's no cure for pedophilia. Not all pedophiles prey on children and instead resist their impulses, staying away from children for the most part. However, according to the National Sex Offenders Registry, a typical pedophile, and that would be an offender, will commit on average 117 sexual crimes in a lifetime. Other sexual crimes against children are done by sociopaths for whom it's about power, control, and debasement of another human being. And children are disproportionately victims because of their vulnerability. There are opportunistic offenders who may be repressed or sex addicts or have issues developing intimate relationships with peers, with women their own age, or with whatever sexual orientation of their own age. Most offenders are known and often trusted by those they prey on. Children and teens who have been sexually abused are not more likely to become sexually abusive adults than children who have not experienced this form of abuse. And this was an extensive study involving quite a few people that was published in JAMA Pediatrics, January 2015. If someone is gay, they are statistically no more likely to sexually abuse children. Perpetrators tend to try to justify their actions. They may say they're fulfilling needs for the child. Another justification is that the child deserves to be punished. I know someone who was married to someone who felt like that this was helpful for the children, taking care of some of their needs. In fact, child sexual abuse is an adverse child experience. That's ACE. Almost every child sexual abuse survivor describes the experience as negative. This has also been studied. Without effective therapy, long-term symptoms such as PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicidality, sexual issues, boundary issues, poor body image, and low self-esteem, along with a tendency towards re-victimization, are more likely to ensue. Survivors may turn to unhealthy coping, such as substance abuse, self-harm, or eating disorders, binging, purging. Strong emotions such as fear, confusion, shame, guilt, anger, emotions linked to betrayal, helplessness, depression, and despair play a role. Abusers often couple the physical act with emotional abuse, including threats, and they can threaten not just the child, but family members, and blame to manipulate the child into believing it's their fault. Now, children will very often, when they are abused, take on the blame and the shame. If they blame their caregivers, their parents, there's nothing they can do about it. If they blame themselves, maybe if I'm good enough, maybe this, maybe that, maybe there's something I can do, and this will stop happening. There can be complicated feelings towards a parent or parents when there's failure to protect, and especially when family does not believe it happened. I saw a client who endured the disbelief of her mother, coupled with anger towards her when she disclosed that her stepfather sexually abused her. And this multiplied the painful impact of the abuse itself. Moving on to more devotee focus. There is a lack of data concerning how many children were abused in the Gurukulas and how many devotee children have been abused since. It's not particularly being studied, and perhaps it's not being studied at all. One source posits that between 1970 and 1980, an estimated 800 ISKCON children suffered criminal neglect, emotional, physical, and/or sexual abuse. Many more witness the abuse, which is traumatic and can be equally traumatic. There can be a lot of guilt and shame when other children are not able to protect the children most impacted. In fact, with the PTSD diagnosis, witnessing an event or experiencing it both qualify for that diagnosis along with the other symptoms. There were also arranged marriages between girls as young as 11. I personally know a devotee or devotees, and men 2 to 3 times their age. Not all schools were implicated. Not all students experienced this. As far as what's happening more currently, according to Sanakadas, the same ISKCON management is still protecting child abusers and continue to put known child abusers in positions of power where they have access to children. Some question as to whether this is deliberate and basically criminal action, or a result of disorganization, or a perhaps naive belief that there is genuine remorse and it won't happen again. And because, they're engaged in devotional service, they're to be considered saintly. So could be any number of those things. Survivors may feel this invalidates their experience and disregards the risk of gambling with children's lives. And many do feel that way. The vast number of ashram gurukulas have been closed, so most abuse would currently tend to occur in other contexts where children are. There are also jivas who come to Krishna consciousness due to the distress from past traumatic abuse prior to their connection with Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So you may come across devotees who, are healing from what they grew up with, long before they met devotees. Physical and emotional abuse are also highly impactful. Physical abuse has a tendency to feed more intergenerational cycles of violence. Corporal punishment, which is just, distinguishes from abuse by the level of injury. Corporal punishment has been shown to trigger harmful psychological and physiological responses. Children experience pain, fear, sadness, anger, shame, and guilt. In addition, this form of punishment leads to psychological stress and the activation of neural pathways associated with danger and extreme stress response. And that sort of, there can be a whole hyperreactivity in the system and hypervigilance as a response. That was a WHO 2021 study. That information comes from the World Health Organization. The more severe and pervasive the physical abuse, the more serious the impacts become. One summary of 69 longitudinal, these are long-term studies, found that physical punishment leads to increases in child behavior problems over time. It consistently results in harmful child outcomes, so it's both ineffective and harmful to children. And that was from a 2021 study. A meta-analysis involving over 160,000 children found that physical punishment can carry the risk of physical abuse and injury. Corporal punishment and abuse can have similar negative outcomes for children, such as mental health and emotional challenges, even lower cognitive ability, lower self-esteem, more aggression, more antisocial behavior, and negative relationships with parents. And that's from 2016, Hershoff and Grogan-Kaler. Child emotional abuse and neglect have been linked to similar mental health outcomes. So now we're talking about not sexual, not physical, emotional abuse and neglect, including low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, suicidality, and self-harm. Emotional abuse includes, but it is not limited to, humiliating, frequently criticizing, scaring, isolating, persistently ignoring, threatening, shouting, name-calling, blaming, and scapegoating while refusing to express kindness or appreciation. So there's a dearth of kindness and appreciation. And that's from NSPCC out of the United Kingdom, UK. It can be harder to identify and easier to internalize than the more obvious physical and sexual abuse. For this reason, there may be more isolation and fewer opportunities for intervention and treatment. The person might not even know that they could benefit from treatment. And the importance of caring for Krishna's children. Srila Prabhupada, if we want them to become great devotees, then we must educate the children with love, not in a negative way, but never apply force, especially to his chanting. This is a letter 121072. As far as what is needed more of to care the best for children, for Krishna's children, according to the head of the North America Child Protection Office, Leela Sukadasi, there is a need for more organization, more funding, and addition of sufficient qualified staff. She stressed the need for a fully staffed victim services department. She said not just like one person or a couple trying to do everything for, to protect children globally. One of the funding challenges, she said, is due to the GBC not really having funds, unlike the leadership bodies of other more organized and established religious institutions. Apparently, funds mostly exist with gurus who receive donations and special projects like the Mayapur project that attract funding. The cost of that project is estimated at $100 million. The child protection budget is $19,000 this year. Leela Sukha told me about that about 4% of the ISKCON child sex abuse cases, and she said you know, we contact the authorities immediately. So this is the first thing that happens. About 4% make it to conviction because of challenges with time, evidence, and also complications when there are other countries like India involved. This statistic is about on par with the US as a whole. So these are, they're tremendously complicated to convict. There can be other ways to bring consequences. And, civil suits have happened. She stressed the importance for survivors of, quote, being heard, cared about, believed, and being accepted. I know from my experience as a trauma-focused therapist that survivors may lack conscious memory of early childhood sexual abuse or may doubt their memories. So just 2 weeks ago, one of my clients, uh, two parts revealed something that happened at age 3 and something that happened at age 4. And this is, of course, over 30 years later. Memories may surface naturally in the course of recovery and healing. I've um, experienced this multiple times working as a therapist with this population. I have been taught not to try to get memories to surface. So it's not a goal of therapy. We're going to get you to remember what happened. And it's not considered necessary to remember details in order to heal from the impacts of this type of trauma as well as other traumas. In my experience, there may be more internal, this is internal, protection and avoidance when treating survivors of child sexual and other abuse. More time may be needed building stability and safety and other resourcing. It may take a while for the person to develop trust in you, to go deeper into childhood abuse. Those are some of the challenges, but it is so worth having the patience. The rewards of healing this type of trauma are immeasurable. Just like last week, I saw a client who did IFS, brain spotting, and expansion brain spotting with me. He had survived a decade of sexual abuse starting at age 4 with multiple extended family members. It was very prevalent within that family. And he spontaneously expressed to me in the session, I don't feel fear the way I used to. My parts feel safe with me. When my parts project stuff onto the world, I recognize it very quickly and am able to quickly communicate with them. I come back to center faster. I'm pretty even emotionally now. There has been trauma brain rewiring. Person's a little bit educated about trauma. I can focus on my life. I have clarity. So these are some of the benefits where, someone can have a completely different experience of life, a completely different experience of devotional life, a completely different perspective on genuine devotional authority. So many, I've listed so many symptoms, and if you just reverse them all, it's just completely life-changing doing trauma work with someone who's experienced significant trauma, particularly the traumas I've just detailed. And Srila Prabhupada, once again, these children are given to us by Krishna. They are Vaishnavas, and we must be very careful to protect them. That's the letter 1972. Try as far as possible to discipline them with love and affection. Another letter, January 10th, 1972. These children are the future hope of our society. Letter 41173. Friends of mine witnessed Prabhupada got very angry when he heard devotee children were being abused. So certainly in my mind, there is no doubt where Prabhupada was coming from and where he stood and stands on this issue. Um, so now we actually have time for me to give you all the ACEs quiz, and you can just make a note or a mark if you have something to write with. If not, you can just kind of get a sense of the account for yourself. So, for each answer yes, you add 1, and there's just 10. The total number at the end of your cumulative number is your ACEs score. So before your 18th birthday, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to, or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? 4, do you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? 5, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect you? Or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? 6, were your parents ever separated or divorced? 7, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs? 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? And 10, did a household member go to prison? So the total is ACEs score. 1 to 3 is considered normal, common, um, and some people consider that on average that devotees may have higher ACEs scores because as our acharyas teach, distress is one of the reasons people come to spiritual life, along with seekers of knowledge. But people can also come out of distress and seek an alternative and hopefully more healthy family with a spiritual family. So that's the class, and we have time for questions, answers, comments. reports if anyone has experienced trying some brain spotting, expansion brain spotting with someone that they're working with. Surit.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Padma. Really appreciate your brevity and vulnerability, and could very much relate. I have a question that sometimes, and I think you were also talking about it, that is natural for people who went through a very difficult abuse to forget. And when you ask people, and then also one of the other things is that they're feeling very disconnected. So when you do try to do a session with someone, and you ask them, like, so, and then also maybe feeling not loved to someone that they, to their source of power or where they feeling like they just kind of feeling like, they don't really know or can trace back to a specific experience. So where do you start in the session with people like that when they, kind of like just disconnected, numb, and all that? Because obviously I believe also like someone like Padma did some work in the years, before like that. And so I guess where do you start with people who totally have not really connection with what's going on to themselves, inside? And
That's an excellent question. Yeah. And we'll also learn more about common protectors when we get into studying the IFS. So one of the first things that I will try to do is validate the protection. That the part that took you out of the experience, quite possibly helped you to survive. The part that numbs the intensity of the pain of the trauma that you've experienced, has very often helped you to survive, and certainly it may have helped you to cope. So validating that protection, that numbness, that dissociation that is so common with severe trauma in particular. I will tend to focus on resourcing. So the first, I think it was the first class was most, or maybe it was the second one, most focused on resourcing. So just kind of expanding the window of tolerance by giving the person more experience of relaxation, of grounding, of focusing on their senses. We did that exercise where you have a visualization that's just visual, just smell, just sound, just feeling, and just taste, to see what is kind of most helpful for that grounding. But normalizing it also as it's a normal trauma coping. It's a common symptom, and the expansion brain spotting can also be a great way to resource, where you just do an expansion spot. So, and then, when the person's system is more ready to really focus in on, trauma work, on the dual spotting, then, you know, chances are they'll know when they're ready. And chances are, if it's too much too soon, they'll just not want to do it anymore. So they'll the protectors and the avoidance will have them avoid another session. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Pranada.
Haribo Chandrika, thank you, Padmavati,
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Bye.
A couple questions, Chandrika. Can you do, instead of taking, like, for instance, if I were to work with someone with trauma and I don't have a lot of experience, I'd be afraid of activating them too much. And maybe I was thinking, can we take on something that's not a big trauma and, just like a small thing just to practice and for me to get a feel for things?
And that's a great idea. Actually, I thought of that. And I mean, when I first became a therapist, it was total deep end. So my first couple, they decided not to tell me that one of them was doing heavy drugs and seeing all kinds of things crawling up the walls. This was not a devotee client, because they wanted to work on their communication. So if it happens, it happens. So it's good to have resources. Yeah, just making sure everyone has that 988 number, as I mentioned in the beginning of this class. Um, and you can also, refer someone to a professional if you feel like they need that extra support. Uh, if there's a devotee professional who's, willing to help give that kind of support, or you can consult with someone. Um, Practicing with each other in this class. Um, you're helping with tech. Maybe we can figure out how to do breakout groups and have that be an option at the end of the class where people who want to stay longer can, and people who are not able to schedule wise don't have to, of course, and where we can have a more, a structure for practicing with each other.
And then if somebody does get very activated on something, maybe just take them to their resource spot and try to end there.
Ending with a resource spot, like we did today, is a very good idea. It's a good idea with
In
everyone.
general. And what do you say, like when I read Grant's book, he tended on his clients would go every week for some time. So, I mean, it seems like you need more than one session to clear up something. Um,
The answer to that is it depends.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did one session with a fire survivor. So this is someone who, lost everything and had to run away from the Lahaina fires here on Maui. And that was enough. She went but she didn't have any complex trauma. So it was just, you know, traumas that traumas that everybody goes through that were resolved, and that there wasn't a complex trauma history. And one session of mostly bringing the parts into the present, and at that point it was 3 weeks into the present. Um, she was suddenly afraid of just about everything. And once the parts were brought out of the fire into the present, that completely cleared up in one session. Similarly, the expansion brain spotting. If there's not much of a trauma history, 1 or 2 sessions can clear something up, like it happened with me with that shark incident. And also, some people have done a lot of work on themselves. So someone who's done a lot of work on themselves, in my experience, tends to process faster.
And if someone can't find a spot, how do you help them?
Well, there's the inside window. The outside window is when the therapist holds the pointer and then just kind of glides it across while carefully observing the person.
Mm.
And they'll have a noticeable reaction. Maybe they'll blink, or maybe they'll have, you can just tell that there's a spot. And then you can stop at that spot.
Okay.
That'll be an activated spot. For expansion resource spot, you can ask those questions that I mentioned at the beginning of this class. You can kind of just, you know, bring the experience more by, engaging the senses and visualizing, maybe a memory when they felt the way they want to feel, maybe, a memory with their spiritual master, or particularly spiritually inspiring memory if it's a spiritual expansion resource spot. Rasangi.
Wow, Haribol, Haribol. Wow,
Haribol.
Swati, that was so beautiful, so heart-touching vulnerability, and just the amount of shift that happened there was fabulous and inspiring. So thank you. And such a complete that whole thing on, I mean, I'm glad we're going to get it in writing, right? You have that all in writing. Oh my gosh, that's quite a compilation of abuses, and then ending in the ACEs test. I took a seminar with that guy, Filidi. That test is used everywhere, all over the world. It's like standard protocol for determining levels of abuse. It's really a very good tool. And I don't know if you have that printed out for us or for the people, but to get that and use it is very helpful as well, right?
Oh
And
yeah, it's in the notes.
okay, good. My question was similar to Pranada's, like, how do you go in with someone who has not got a lot of connection with their internal world or their feelings, and have them find these spots? Do you give any kind of talk beforehand about what you're going to do or what you want, how you want them to approach that piece? Because that's like subtle. And maybe everybody has it naturally. But I'm wondering what have you found people have a difficult time sometimes figuring out just where that spot is that's activated, or where that resource is, or does that come naturally?
Mm. Well, so far with my clients, I haven't found them having a problem, but of course they've been doing some therapy, so there is that. Um,
If
you
you're
know,
starting
I
with someone new, like starting with someone new coming in and they don't know much about this, but they want healing, how could you introduce that, I wonder, or is that not necessary?
actually that'll be happening this coming week. I have a new client who hasn't done any therapy about anything. So yeah, you know, first session is definitely more talking, more like, you know, what's your goal? What if I wave my magic wand and you achieve your goal? What would that look like? What would that be like? So and just that getting acquainted, because and with the history, I'll say, you know, what in your history do you think it would be helpful for me to know? So again, I'm not pushing them to give a thorough trauma history. That can be quite triggering. And just in my training and experience, too much for a first session. There's the intake form, so there's been, some of that. Um, Lisa Larson mentioned that she does the ACEs test as part of her standard intake. Um, so she happened to mention that she felt like the ACEs scores were higher on Maui than other places. And so it's probably similar to people in distress. Well, there's the intergenerational trauma of the local Hawaiian people, of course, loss upon loss. Also, people who come to the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far, far away, quite often from their families. There's certain parallels between that and people who seek out spiritual life, an alternative to a family that may have not been ideal. But that was interesting to me because she's working a lot with fire survivors, and she said the ACEs scores here were higher, so a lot of complex trauma.
So I'm just wondering, do you give any kind of introduction to the expansion brain spotting, or do you hand out anything in the beginning, anything like that?
So another good question. So with the demos, it's not completely representative because I do have a conversation with the person before, you know, so we're not spending the whole class time with that background, which is why I sort of, ran through it at the beginning of class, like what would normally be done with someone. You know, I guess the answer is how much is asked and how much is shared. It depends. I mean, there's people who work with, for example, veterans who really don't want to talk about it. And with these experiential therapies, people can do effective treatment. They can do EMDR, expansion brain spotting. The person doesn't have to talk about it. They don't have to talk about it hardly at all. People who have been in war situations, a lot of times they feel tremendous guilt and shame for what they have done under orders or in situations. And so for them to talk about it with another person, that might be the difference between getting support and therapy or not getting it. So that's one of the great things these experiential therapies has opened up more.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you much. And one more question.
I was going to ask you a question.
Well, okay. Go ahead.
You can ask your one more question first, but I was just going to ask you the same question so you can share your experience working with people who, have trouble accessing, can't think of a positive memory and all that sort of thing.
So the thing is, like, I work slowly with people because, like someone was saying, you don't want to activate this stuff and then send them off. So I take a while to get a lot to know people. It's not just like wham bam, whatever that is. It's like a process of developing a relationship, and that's healing too. So don't minimize just your connection with them. And then I do some history taking, and I will resource each time. I give them tools to take home with them. So during the week, they have some place to go to kind of comfort themselves, because you don't just jump into this deep water, right? Generally speaking, right away. So
and working with the population you're working with, the stakes are particularly high. Working with an IOP with addiction.
And addiction.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like working with people who have suicidal thoughts.
And there's a lot of that there
Yeah.
also. There's all of it in the complex situation. So timing and rapport. And how do you know you're making a good connection? We could talk about that sometime. You know what I mean? How do you know that their person is really beginning to trust you and that is building? But my other thing for you was, the other thing is that religious abuse is one of the worst abuses because it represents God. So it's like a stranger, that's bad. A parent, that's really bad. But God, the representative of your church, like, I find that so damning. People with huge issues, like developing huge anxiety issues and problems their whole life because of what happened when they were in religious school. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. And then maybe sometime you could talk a little bit more about gaslighting, since gaslighting is a really big thing now. It's such a big topic and we hear it all the time. How do we identify it? How do we stop it? How do we recognize when someone's being gaslit? It's such an interesting topic. I find it happens all the time and people are becoming much more aware. So maybe, I don't know if you have time to do that, but I would love to hear. what you have to say about that too. Thank you so much.
Uh,
Amazing.
yeah, I mean, you know, gaslighting, denying someone's experience of what happened, giving them the impression that, that they're delusional or crazy or, this couldn't have happened. Um, yeah, I mean, with child sexual abuse, uh, perpetrators can do it, and the person they're disclosing it to can then do it again. It can be a double whammy of what I experienced that was wrong didn't happen, or you know it's my fault, or all these things that are also forms of gaslighting. It definitely complicates things. It definitely adds to the overall distress, and
Crazy.
definitely having even one person who in a helper role, a therapist role, a caring devotee who understands confidentiality role can make all the difference.
One of the other things, I know it's time, but one of the other
It
things that
is.
happened is that the children in some of the schools were encouraged to play sex play together. There's also that element of guilt and shame that happened. So that was an extra layer of trauma and shame that happened. So there's so many different layers, hoping we can do something to help.
Yes. And you can, and you are. It's so appreciated. So appreciated.
Padmavati has a question, Chandrika.
Oh, Padmavati, can you possibly email me the question? It's 9:30 and I've made a commitment to finish the class at 9:30. And I can also reach out to you right after this class. Thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful for your intention in taking this class, for how you are helping or will be helping devotees, and who have and are going through so much that can be treated, that can be helped. Thank you.